Before we step into the night when a child was born who would shake empires, break idols, and rewrite the meaning of faith itself, it is necessary to listen to what the three heavenly books say about this moment. The Torah presents Abraham as the chosen one whose destiny was written even before his birth, a man separated from his people to establish a covenant with the one God. The Bible describes him as the father of believers, a man called out of darkness into divine promise, whose life would become a blessing for all nations. The Quran speaks of Ibrahim as a Hanif, one who turned away from falsehood instinctively, even before revelation, guided by an inner light placed in his soul by Allah himself. All three scriptures agree on one thing without contradiction. Abraham was not born as an ordinary child. His arrival was a threat. And if you enjoy deep historical stories that connect faith, power, and forgotten truths, make sure you stay with this journey and become part of the Son of Adam family, because what unfolds next is not just history, it is a warning written in blood, fire, and broken stone. The world into which Abraham was born was drowning in idols. This was not a primitive society struggling for survival. This was a highly advanced civilization for its time. Cities rose with engineered precision. Towers reached toward the heavens. Knowledge flowed through astronomy, mathematics, and governance. Yet spiritually, humanity had collapsed into a marketplace of gods. Every force of nature was carved into stone. Every fear was given a face. Every desire was worshipped. Power was centralized, not just politically, but theologically. At the heart of this world stood a tyrant king, remembered in Islamic tradition as Nimrod. A ruler who did not merely demand loyalty, he demanded divinity. He claimed the power of life and death. He ruled through fear, spectacle, and a priesthood that protected his throne by controlling belief itself. In this society, idols were not symbols. They were systems. They justified slavery. They justified kingship. They justified the crushing of any thought that questioned authority. And then came the prophecy. Ancient texts and oral traditions speak of a chilling prediction that spread among the priests and astrologers of the empire. The stars, they claimed, revealed the birth of a child who would challenge the gods, shatter the idols, and end the reign of false divinity. This was not dismissed as superstition. Because these men studied the skies. They tracked patterns. They believed power flowed from the heavens. And what they saw terrified them. The prophecy was simple but devastating. A boy would be born from among the people, and through him, the entire religious order would collapse. The king reacted the only way tyrants ever do when they sense the end approaching. He declared war on infancy. Pregnant women were monitored. Newborn boys were hunted. Families lived in terror. Midwives became informants. Homes became execution grounds. The empire chose to kill the future before it could speak. This is where Abraham's story stops being a legend and becomes a message. Because when power feels threatened, it always attacks the innocent first. Abraham's father, known in Islamic tradition as Azar, was not a rebel. He was not a secret believer. He was deeply embedded in the system. Some narrations describe him as an idol maker, a craftsman whose hands shaped the very gods people bowed before. Irony does not get darker than this. The man destined to destroy idols was born in a house that manufactured them. According to Islamic tradition, Abraham's mother hid her pregnancy. Some accounts say she fled to a cave. Others suggest secret confinement away from the city. What matters is not the location, it is the fear. Fear ruled that world, and yet, despite the surveillance, despite the soldiers, despite the king's decree, the child was born. Silently. Without celebration, without witnesses, no drums announced his arrival. No astrologers recorded his birth. No palace acknowledged his existence. But the heavens knew. The Quran does not describe angels descending or miracles lighting the sky at his birth. Instead, it presents something far more powerful: divine purpose unfolding quietly, unnoticed by tyranny. Because real revolutions do not begin with noise. They begin with survival. This child did not cry out defiance. He did not raise a fist. He simply lived, and that alone was enough to terrify an empire. As Abraham grew, there were no visible signs that set him apart physically. He was not born with a crown. He did not wield power. He did not possess wealth. What he possessed was far more dangerous. He questioned. While other children accepted idols as toys, Abraham observed them. While others repeated inherited beliefs, he examined them. His mind did not submit easily. His heart rejected contradictions. The Quran later captures this mindset when it describes him questioning the stars, the moon, and the sun, not because he believed they were gods, but because he was demonstrating the emptiness of false worship. This was not rebellion taught by men. This was clarity placed by God. And clarity is the greatest enemy of systems built on lies. The Bible presents Abraham as one called out by God, commanded to leave his land and people. But before he ever left physically, he had already departed spiritually. He did not belong to his society even while living inside it. The Torah emphasizes covenant, but covenant begins with separation. Abraham was separated long before promises were spoken. That is why his birth is described as a threat, not because he carried a sword, but because he carried truth. Empires can survive wars. They cannot survive exposed falsehood. This is where the episode takes a darker turn. Because the idols were not just religious symbols. They were economic pillars. Pilgrims came to worship. Offerings flowed. Authority was reinforced. Questioning idols meant questioning wealth, hierarchy, and control. A single voice saying, "This makes no sense," could destabilize everything. And that voice belonged to a child raised among idols. Imagine the tension. A boy watching his father carve gods that could not hear him. A boy watching people bow to objects he knew were shaped by human hands. A boy growing up under a king who claimed godhood while eating, sleeping, and fearing death like any man. Every day Abraham lived, the prophecy lived. And every year he survived, the fear deepened. The system could not see him clearly yet. But destiny was already moving. As Abraham grew, the world around him remained frozen in obedience. People did not think they inherited. They did not question, they memorized. Faith had become tradition, and tradition had become a prison. Abraham's mind did not fit inside that prison. He watched carefully, not with anger, not with rebellion, but with a strange calm that made his silence unsettling. While others saw sacred objects, he saw crafted stone. While others saw divine power, he saw dependence, people depending on lifeless things to define their existence. The Quran captures this phase of Abraham's life with subtle brilliance. It shows him reflecting, observing the stars, the moon, the sun not as objects of worship, but as lessons. When the star set, he rejected it. When the moon faded, he dismissed it. When the sun disappeared, he declared that he would not worship what vanishes. This was not confusion. This was demonstration. Abraham was teaching a society without preaching. Because the strongest argument against falsehood is logic that cannot be silenced. But logic is dangerous. especially in a world where authority is built on unquestioned belief. His first confrontation did not happen in public squares or royal courts. It happened at home, with his father. The Quran presents this dialogue with painful clarity. Abraham speaks respectfully, gently, repeatedly. He does not insult. He does not mock. He asks questions that expose cracks. Why do you worship what cannot hear you? Why do you bow to what cannot see you? Why do you fear what you yourself create? Azar does not answer with reason. He answers with threat. This is a pattern that repeats throughout history. When belief has no evidence, it leans on power. When authority has no truth, it leans on fear. Abraham's father warns him. Society threatens him. Tradition isolates him. Yet he does not retreat. Because truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. The idols watched silently as a boy dismantled centuries of obedience not with force, but with thought. But the system does not tolerate slow poison. The day came when Abraham stood alone inside the temple. Stone faces surrounded him. Carved gods towered over him. The symbols of power stared down in eternal silence. And something inside him reached its limit. He did not scream. He did not hesitate. He acted. One by one, the idols fell. Stone cracked. Wood shattered. False divinity collapsed into dust. Only one idol remained untouched, the largest of them all. And around its neck, Abraham placed the tool of destruction. It was not vandalism. It was a message. When the people returned, the city exploded in outrage. Rage echoed through the streets. Blasphemy had been committed. The gods had been attacked. And immediately, one name surfaced. Abraham. They dragged him forward, demanding answers. They did not ask why. They asked, "How dare you?" And Abraham responded with words that still echo through time. Ask the biggest one, if he can speak. In that moment, logic cornered faith. The people hesitated. For a fraction of time, doubt entered their hearts. They knew the truth. They knew idols could not speak. They knew they had been lying to themselves. But admitting that truth meant losing everything. So they chose denial. Instead of questioning idols, they accused Abraham. Instead of breaking falsehood, they protected it. This is where the story shifts from debate to punishment. Because systems forgive ignorance, they do not forgive exposure. The decision was made swiftly. Abraham would be burned alive. Publicly. Spectacularly. As a warning. The king's authority had to be restored. The prophecy had to be crushed. Fear had to be reestablished. They gathered wood for days. Some narrations say weeks. A fire so massive was built that birds could not fly near it. Heat distorted the air. Flames roared like a living beast. This was not execution. This was theater. The king wanted the world to watch truth die. Abraham was bound. He was alone. There was no army, no followers, no miracle yet, just a young man standing against an empire. And yet, according to Islamic tradition, at this moment even the angels asked permission to help him. But Abraham refused, because his trust was not in rescue. It was in God. The Quran captures the climax with words that silence every doubt. Allah commanded the fire. Be cool and safe for Abraham. Fire, the ultimate weapon of destruction, became obedience itself. What was meant to erase him became his protection. What was meant to terrify the masses became the proof of divine authority. The fire failed, and when power fails publicly, it never recovers fully. The people stood frozen. The king's spectacle collapsed. Fear shifted sides. Abraham walked out alive, not victorious by weapons, not defended by armies, but preserved by truth. This moment shattered more than idols. It shattered the illusion that power controls destiny. But survival did not mean acceptance. The system could not kill him, so it expelled him. Exile replaced execution. And this is where Abraham's journey transforms from resistance to legacy. Because sometimes, truth does not conquer by staying. It conquers by leaving and multiplying elsewhere. When Abraham walked away from the fire, the world did not applaud him. There were no celebrations, no public apologies, no mass repentance. Empires rarely admit defeat. Instead, silence followed him, the most dangerous silence of all. A silence filled with fear, resentment, and unresolved doubt. The idols still stood in some places, the king still ruled, but something invisible had cracked forever. Authority had been exposed. Abraham was no longer just a rebel thinker. He was now a living proof that divine power does not reside in stone, fire, or kings. And that made him more dangerous alive than dead. The Quran presents Abraham's next step not as escape, but as obedience. He leaves his land, his people, his father, and everything familiar, not because he is defeated, but because he is commanded. The Bible echoes this moment with the call that defines Abraham's legacy. Leave your land, your people, and your father's house, to a land I will show you. This was not migration, this was separation. Abraham did not leave in search of comfort. He left carrying uncertainty, faith, and a promise he could not yet see. He walked away from civilization into the unknown, guided not by maps, but by trust. And this is where his story shifts from confrontation to foundation. Because destroying idols is one thing, building belief is another. Abraham's journey took him through lands filled with different gods, different kings, different cultures, yet the same spiritual disease. Everywhere he went, power demanded worship. Everywhere he went, people bowed to created things instead of the Creator. But Abraham did not rebuild temples. He rebuilt understanding. The Quran repeatedly describes him as an ummah, a nation unto himself. This is not poetic exaggeration. It is historical truth. One man, carrying one belief, laid the groundwork for spiritual lineages that would shape the world. Judaism traces itself through Isaac. Christianity traces faith through Abraham's covenant. Islam traces lineage and belief through Ishmael. 3 global faiths, 1 origin, and it all traces back to a child born in secrecy, hunted before he could speak. The Torah emphasizes covenant promises of land, descendants, and blessing. But covenant required testing. Abraham was not chosen because he was protected from hardship. He was chosen because he remained faithful through it. The Bible emphasizes trust, a man who believed God even when promises delayed, even when logic failed, even when sacrifice was demanded. The Quran emphasizes submission, not blind obedience, but conscious surrender rooted in certainty. These are not contradictions. They are dimensions of the same truth. Abraham's greatest threat to the world was not that he broke idols. It was that he broke inheritance. Before Abraham, belief was tribal. Gods belonged to lands. Faith belonged to bloodlines. Truth was local. Abraham made belief universal. He taught that truth does not belong to geography. That God is not inherited, he is recognized. That faith is not tradition, it is choice. And systems built on control cannot survive choice. This is why Abraham never ruled a kingdom. Because his mission was larger. Kings control borders. Abraham shaped consciousness. The Quran records his prayer not for power, but for legacy. He asked that his descendants remain guided. He asked that future generations remember truth. He asked that hearts incline toward belief. And history answered him, but not without cost. Abraham lived most of his life without seeing the fulfillment of promises. Children came late, separation came often, sacrifice came repeatedly, because faith is not rewarded instantly. It is rewarded eternally. The final irony of Abraham's story is this. The king who tried to burn him is remembered only as a footnote. The idols he destroyed exist only in museums. The empire that hunted him collapsed into dust. But Abraham's name is spoken billions of times every single day. In prayers, in scriptures, in identity. That is the difference between power and truth. Power demands remembrance. Truth earns it. And this is why his birth was a threat. Not because he carried weapons. Not because he gathered followers. But because he carried certainty in a world built on lies. If Abraham were born today, the methods would change: surveillance, propaganda, character assassination, but the fear would be the same. Because a person who refuses to worship falsehood is always dangerous. As this episode comes to a close, remember this. Abraham's story is not ancient history. It is a mirror. Every age has its idols. Every society has its sacred lies. Every generation decides whether it will inherit belief or question it. And somewhere, quietly, without announcement, truth is always being born again. If this story made you think, challenged what you assume, or made you see faith differently, then stay connected with Son of Adam. Share these stories, reflect on them, and be part of keeping truth alive, not as tradition, but as understanding. Because the fire still exists. The question is, who will walk through it unburned?